My name is Dave Reski, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Joanne Davis. Welcome, Joanne.
Well, thank you, David. I'm excited to be here today.
That's great. Joanne is a CEO coach with C12, and she works with leaders to help them deal with issues and grow their business. She also spent 20 years with General Dynamics and Gulfstream Aerospace, with 10 of those as a director of government contracts and global trade compliance. Oh my gosh, that sounds complicated.
That's a mouthful for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure you learned a lot in those years that you're bringing into your CEO coaching role, and we'll talk a lot about that. But I really appreciate you being part of this. I'm looking forward to our conversation and all you have to share with our listeners. So thank you.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it too, David. So I said to you, this is a first for me. So I'm excited to be a part of a new medium.
That's great. Well, as you know, I like to start these conversations with what I call a mythbuster question. And the myth that we talked about is about busyness. So we said, one myth that's out there is busyness is a badge of honor. And if I'm not busy in all areas of my life, then I'm not being as productive as I could be. True or not true?
Definitely not true. So busyness is definitely not a badge of honor. I think a lot of people put an equal sign between busyness and importance, or busyness and, it promotes in our culture right now a more is better, bigger is better mentality that's in our culture right now. So definitely, in my opinion anyways, my personal life as I came through my career at General Dynamics, actually 25 years of service there. And I was definitely a busy person. And after reading a book by Bob Buford called Halftime, really started to think about what it would mean to move from success to significance. And so if you think of success in terms of all that busyness and chaos that goes along with that, what pruning needed to take place in my life to go from that to significance and meaning and value and joy. And really my role at C12 has allowed me to move to or transition to that.
Wow, there's so many big ideas in what you've just shared there. So we're going to dig into a lot of that. And I've actually read the book Halftime. I saw Bob speak many years ago. I don't know if I could quote it in detail, but I remember some of the big ideas. So that'll be somewhat, hopefully we'll get to in our conversation as well. Great book. But let's kind of talk about this idea that bigger is better. And if you're working with CEOs and companies, often they want to grow. So isn't bigger better? And doesn't busyness lead to, or kind of activity lead to getting your company bigger? Isn't that a good thing?
No, I think busyness is a trap, honestly. It relinquishes our control as leaders to do meaningful fulfillment. So in terms of healthy businesses, I really think that leaders need to use their hand, much like a gardener, in pruning, such that they are allowing for growth in their business, so that they can, yes, get bigger, but not with all the noise that goes with that. So really, I think the key there is, busyness, it can be that dangerous Venus flytrap that sucks you in with the supersonic society that we're in right now, that you've got your Twitter account up, you've got your email up, that you're never shut down, and you're just churning for the sake of churning, just, putting one fire out before the next one, comes along. And it doesn't allow us as leaders to do much strategic thinking that really allows us to grow our businesses for the better.
Yeah, so I can really relate to that. So it's easy to get kind of busy, and sometimes you feel really productive when I've got 3 screens and I feel like I should have 5 screens. I'd be really better off if I had 5 screens. I don't think my laptop will support that, but if it would, I would get 2 more screens, because it's helpful to have all these things going on at the same time. And I do often feel like I'm getting a lot done, But as you said, busyness doesn't equate necessarily to impact that you're making.
Mhm.
And, and we're going to get to pruning in a second, but how do leaders, in your experience working with leaders, how do they take that time to kind of stop and turn off these things and take time to think so
Mhm.
that they're kind of making that, you know, finding out what's really important and kind of being more strategic with their time?
Yeah, it comes down to prioritization, and you really have to make that time in your schedule. For myself as a leader, through my 25 years career, I would always put time on my calendar that my door, even though I said I had an open door policy, there were days that my door was closed, just to allow me to think through some of those items in a more strategic fashion. At C12, we provide our CEOs and Christian business leaders the opportunity to take what we call a sabbatical from their business once a month and come around a round table of their peers and use business tools and that peer advisory environment to take time away from their business and really focus on that strategic piece, whether it's marketing or if it's an M&A strategy or leadership development, whatever that might be for them.
Yeah. So imagine when you're speaking to prospective members of C12, sometimes you get that objection. Hey, I can't take a day out of my business every month and do that. But it is so important to be able to do that and that thinking time. But let's talk about that first idea you shared for a few minutes, which is the door closed policy. Because I know it's almost a cliche in business, and especially you're a manager and leader. My door's always open. Come talk to me. But that can often be a trap for leaders, right? And I heard a phrase once that stuck with me in one management book I read, and it was the got a minute trap. And basically, people used to come to my office and kind of poke their head in every 20 times a day and say, "Hey, Dave, got a minute?" And it was just as this constant interruption. And now that happens through chat and Slack and email and not even public forums like Twitter and LinkedIn and other things like that, but it can happen kind of all the time. So how do you as a business leader uh, make time to close your door? And what do you do when the door is closed so you can kind of be productive with that time and use it effectively to think?
Yeah, I think you need to set healthy boundaries with your team for sure. I think certainly before COVID, we had started to transition into this environment, but now those boundaries I think are even more blurred with more and more people working from home. So, that door, physical door being closed where I was in an office and people could see that I closed the door intentionally and they might peek around to the glass or try and knock and I'd be like no, and they knew. My team, we talked about those boundaries as far as when to reach out, when not to reach out. And so I now think in this environment of remote work, I think it's even more important for that communication to take place, and maybe there's a key word or phrase that goes in a text or an email, so if it's urgent, it's something that you need to read or not read. I've always said I balanced my career as a three-legged stool, and that stool could not really stand if one of those legs was not, or cut short, if you will, and or not present. And so really trying to keep that piece of balance together as you go through your personal and work life. And I think that's just, it starts with communication with your team and making sure they understand those boundaries. I'm not going to reach out to them just to say, I was looking at your expense report and I noticed this at 10 o'clock at night. And if I did, then I would put a note to just say they know if something comes in at 10 o'clock, it's because Joanne was managing her time and maybe I was at a volleyball game at 3 o'clock and I couldn't finish my work day, between traditional hours and now just catching up on things. So
Yeah, those are powerful thoughts. So, and you talked about this world of remote work, and my company is all remote. We don't have an office. Everybody's remote, and I think a lot of businesses, even businesses that are in hybrid, people are still half remote most of the time. So, and recently I counted up the number of communications tools that I use, And there were 13 different communications tools, and tools like Slack can be on your desktop all the time. We use Teams, which is chat, comes up all the time. Emails are coming in, all these things kind of happen. So how do you, as a business leader, or with your clients, your CEO clients, how do you encourage them to shut it all off? And how much time should they do to shut it all off? And is it all off? Do they kind of tune out from everything and take time to think? And how do you make that, how do you make that productive?
I don't think there's a one size fits all, honestly, David, for that. I think the CEO will know from, I look at it when I said the three-legged stool, not only from your business perspective, but your spiritual and your personal perspective. So, you've got all of those items. And so in any given time, in order for that to be balanced, I think, sometimes it's like a teeter-totter, and one gives while the other is up. And so you have to really pay close attention to that. In our C12 forums, we use what's called a balance wheel for our CEOs to manage that. And we have 8 different categories that we have our CEOs manage, or not manage, yes, manage, but also report from an accountability standpoint to their peers. 2 of our lowest categories are always rest and retreat, and health and fitness. And so although they may be doing really well in some of the other areas, those 2 areas are historically low. And so what we'll start to see is that accountability within the peer group to say, David, you've said for the last 3 months that you were going to go to the gym. And so I'll meet you there at 7:30, and we just really hold each other accountable from that perspective. So, but that might not be something that you need every month, and it might not be what I need to be held accountable for as far as busyness. I think we all fill our lives with things that, just kind of feel like it's that, frog in the hot water syndrome, where it starts off slow boiling, and then it's just in there and in there. And then before you know it, you're exhausted, or in the case of the frog, you're dead. Had you just thrown yourself right into that, you'd be like, oh, this is like, I'm out of here. This is totally chaos. But it doesn't happen overnight. It just keeps building slowly. And I think that's where the pruning comes in, and knowing and taking that intentional time, at least quarterly, to look at what needs to be pruned in your life.
Yeah, that's powerful. So one of your evaluation metrics with your group is rest and retreat. I love that. So that's something that all of us talk about, but as you said, CEOs and leaders don't always take that time for that rest. And often I think what happens is, when we take that time for our rest, we say, oh, great, I'm going to take this day off and I'm going to go work on real estate, or I'm going to work on my family, or I'm going to do this thing with my kids that I always wanted to do, or I'm going to take them camping, and now I'm going to go and I'm going to play golf, and I'm going to work. I got to go sailing. We kind of fill our other lives with that. And so, sometimes what we call rest and retreat is really just busyness in another form, right? So are CEOs really, are you trying to encourage them to really rest and retreat?
Yeah.
Or is it really just, make time for your family and make time for your friends and other things, fill it with other kinds of busyness?
No, as I've, shared with you, David, I'm strong in my faith. And so that retreat for our Christian CEOs and business owners is going into the quiet place with the Lord, and really just being present there and giving him an opportunity to speak into us. Not again, just our businesses, but our personal life, our spiritual life. And if we don't give time for that, for us to hear, because there's so much exterior noise going on, we really don't know where to prune, even when we get to that area. So I think that's where it starts. And we encourage all of our CEOs to take that first 90 minutes of their day, if they can, and spend in just that kind of silence with the Lord, and just looking for direction.
Wow, that can make a huge difference. I say it's going to make a huge difference, but with your CEO clients,
Mhm.
imagine that a lot of them are very focused on results. So they've got metrics and KPIs, and they're kind of driving. They've got goals and all that. How do they think about results from the non-busy time, from that 90 minutes a day, or from that personal retreat? What are the outcomes? What are the results? How do they measure whether they're using that time well, or do they? Is that even important?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think, we're all at different places in our walk with the Lord and, that time spent, but a lot of our CEOs use that time for journaling. And from that perspective, can go back and see just, what were they focused on, what ideas came up, and that they were praying about during that time, and then see that success answered, or that prayer really answered much later. A lot of times the Lord tells us, he answers us, right now, or he may say wait, or he may say no. And so just seeing the timing of things, I don't know how many times that it's always our will, again, looking to society right now, and we're so me focused and internal focused that we we want what we want instead of waiting for the Lord to provide what he's going to provide, and he knows much better than we do. So I always say I've got my mustard seed, and I'll plant that mustard seed, but we'll see what the Lord is going to water and where he's going to take it from there.
Yeah. So that idea of journaling, I just want to talk about that a little bit because I journal a lot. I have this online journal that I've been using for several years, and I just looked at it this morning, and I have 1,100 entries online, let alone the books that I've had since I was, a teenager journaling. So are there any, tips or techniques you give to your clients, or things that help them be better at journaling, whether it's just how they do it, kind of how to use that quiet, non-busy time as productively as possible? How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah. I actually will recommend that they go into that quiet time. I use the acronym. And so just, giving the Lord adoration, and then coming to him with uh, oh, any requests that we might have. And I'll ask them to journal those, what those requests were. I always root it in scripture, go to, spend some time in scripture, see how it's speaking to anything. And then just, again, it's just quiet. And maybe some people who, are not Christian, maybe it's meditation for them. And it's just that quiet time to just give your mind rest. I think in terms of a runner or any kind of athlete who is, really pushing any of their muscles, if you're training for a marathon, they're not running every day. And our brains just do not have time as humans to turn off anymore. Turning off is, like you said, it's, you know, mindlessly, swiping through some kind of social media feed, or it's binge watching your latest Netflix series, but no time to just really be quiet and just breathe and listen to what might be resonating in there. So I just ask them to share those ideas on paper, put them down, because a lot of times you'll look back and you'll see where an idea was birthed, and forget that that's where its roots had come from. And so it's, when you talk about the value add of that time, that's where you start to see it, is when you go back in your journal and you start looking to see, wow, yes, this, I was thinking about this 3 months ago, and this is where it's come to fruition, and where it's led to on the journey. So
Yeah, that whole process has made such a huge impact on my life, and I can definitely see the value of that. So let's
and
shift
sometimes
gears.
you start with, just, sorry to interrupt you, David, but
Okay.
sometimes you just start with 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And even in those 5 minutes, just that 5 minutes, then maybe in a few weeks you extend it to 10 minutes, and just from there now, 90 minutes for me to sit quiet in the morning and start my day, and a more mature leader with us definitely is an easy go do. And it really saves them in a lot of areas of unnecessary busyness, because they've taken that quiet time to reevaluate what's important.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about personal life. So we've been talking about, business leaders and some of the way they need to kind of step back and take that retreat or that quiet time. But as I've observed people, a lot of people that I work with, especially younger people with families, the busyness in the family life today is just extreme. I mean, right now I'm at a phase of life where my kids are grown, and so I have more time. But when I was in the middle of it, I remember, having like 3 soccer games on a weekend, and then taking the kids to play practice, and going to school. And it was a 12-hour a day job just managing the kids with, along with work and everything else. It was crazy. And so, what advice or guidance do you give to your CEO members about how to not be overly busy in their family and these other commitments they get into?
Yeah, I think we need to be really careful um, as role models, just, what we're setting up for our kids as an example of what success looks like. And so they're looking at us, and, my kids are all grown up as well, and we're empty nesters, Rick and I, and married 32 years. And we went through a lot of that craziness as well. And, I say it's like the busy brag. And even in your personal life, I've got my kids enrolled in piano, and then we got to take Ashley to volleyball, and then we got to take Braden to lacrosse, and oh, we got this going on this weekend. And just starting to talk about that with our friends, that seems to be the leader of conversations, is just, well, how busy are you and how busy am I? And it becomes a contest. And so I think we really need to be role models for our children, and set some boundaries as well around their personal time to make sure that, we've got these kids in all of these sports. And my son, we originally were from Canada, and he started playing hockey at the age of 4. And, he wasn't going to be a Wayne Gretzky. The amount of children that really rise to that level, that would even get scholarship level. Our daughter played varsity volleyball, and by the time she got to college, she was not even interested in looking at a volleyball anymore. Never mind playing at the college level. And so I think as parents, we've got to keep some what am I looking to say? Like, just some boundaries around that, some realistic expectations, I think, is what I'm looking for. That our kids are not going to be the next superstar in some sporting activity, and that involving them in, club and school sports, and excelling them to the best and the best so they can have bragging rights, I think is an exhaustive roller coaster ride for both the parents and the kids.
Yeah, and yet we kind of want to keep them. Maybe it's because we're so busy. We want to keep them busy and give them all these opportunities. And we did that with our kids as well. But it's so funny. I mean, I grew up in a generation where my parents didn't do any of that. So their whole idea of my summer vacation was, there's the back door with a creek in the back. You've got a bike, go hang out with your friends, see you for lunch and dinner. And then when the streetlights come on, show up back at the house. It was a simpler time. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the opportunities for scheduling sports and stuff and camp and all these other things. But I did all that with my kids. So, is it better or worse? Are we, teaching our kids to lead a busy, structured lifestyle, and that's going to help them be successful? Or are we teaching them to be anxious and frustrated and turn them into busy versions of ourselves later on by overscheduling? How do you feel about all that?
I honestly do not feel like busy equals success.
Mm,
I think that I think it really just creates a lot of chaos, and to your earlier point, anxiety. I think if you are to look at, the generation of children now, depression and all of those things that, children that have so much access to people yet have never felt more alone in their lives. And so why is that? And it's because there's no time to form relationships. There's no time to just, again, just be, and be happy with just who you are, who God created you to be, instead of, just this, like I started off by saying, a culture that just keeps promoting more, bigger equals better. And I don't think it is better.
do you think sometimes we put our, maybe this is, summation of what you're saying, we put our self-worth in how much we're able to accomplish or how busy we are, and if we're not able to accomplish a lot, we still have a lot of activities, so we feel like we've accomplished a lot even though maybe we're not. Is that a driver of our self-worth? And if that's not where our self-worth comes from, how do we say we're worthwhile people if we're not busy and getting stuff done?
Yeah. Actually, that was a big struggle for me when I left Fortune 100, when I retired last spring and I joined C12, and making that big transition. It was a pendulum swing, really 180 degrees for me. And just, even spending 90 minutes with the Lord in the morning was not something that I would have even thought as I was, jet setting across the world. I was probably gone 2/3 of the year on international travel. So I had all of that busyness. And certainly now, as I've had to take steps both, spiritually, professionally, and personally to prune out some things, I can see the time that I can spend to be more strategic and create relationships instead of, wasting time, in toxic relationships, or just, things that weren't um, giving me that same meaning or that same value.
Yeah, that's really good. You've given us a lot to think about, Joanne. I think the time that I spend journaling and the quiet time I spend aside from all the busyness of work and life. It sometimes it concerns me because I'm not getting as much done, but you've helped me remember that it's super important in my life, and maybe the most important time I could spend. And the impact of those decisions and those thoughts and those times can be probably much more effective than writing another email to a prospective client, or having a short follow-up meeting with one of the people I work with, or all those tactical things that we have to get done. So it's very important. Thank you for
Oh,
sharing.
you're
Yeah.
welcome. And listen, it's always the pot calling the kettle black, because it's a work in progress for me, for sure. As I said, you get so much pressure from society, and what, you get caught up in it. As I said, with the example with the frog getting boiled, you're just adding a few things here and a few things there, and before you know it, you're in that boiling water. And so unless you're intentional, and you recognize it for what it is, and then take the steps, as I said, to start pruning things out, you're just going to exhaust yourself, to the point that, well, it all looks different for all of us. But
Yeah. So my last question, in that, let's say I'm the frog in boiling water. I've started with a little business. I've gotten busier and busier and busier. And now I'm at max. I got things going on all the time, but I know that I should be taking that time to be
mhm.
more thoughtful. Where do I start? What's the first thing you would encourage me to do if I was in your group?
I think you've got to start, and we can take it from a business perspective first. But I think this applies to your personal and your spiritual life as well. What is your vision? Where are you trying to get to? And what are those crown jewels that are going to get you there? And then what is all the other things that are noise or nice to have? And that starts with setting your strategic plan every year. It's incredible for me to see how many CEOs and business leaders may take the time to, or don't take the time to strategically think through, and they're just running from one fire and just letting circumstances really guide where they're going to be. And so with that, then you can start looking at not only employees and customers and product lines that maybe, yes, I can get a 5 times return on this product line and, 5 times on these other 3 product lines. But if I was to cancel those 3, even though they're profitable, and put all my focus in this first bucket, maybe I could get 500 times. And so I think without that strategic look at things and the vision of where you're going, I think we get kind of caught up in just keeping adding and adding and adding to our portfolio and our plates. And so, as I said, that's, not only products, but that's customers. Do we have customer markets that we're looking into or that we've serviced for many years, that really, if we look at how much energy it takes to service that customer group, that maybe it's just not worth the effort that's going into that. And so just revisiting that.
Yeah. So you got to take the time to be strategic, to be thoughtful, and then you have to get out of the busyness in order to really do that and prune the things in your business and your life that are not serving your ultimate vision. So very powerful thoughts, Joanne. Thank you very much for sharing all of us. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, David. I've enjoyed my time with you.
If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about C12 or what you're doing in Tampa, how would they learn about you?
Yeah, they can reach out to me at Joanne.Davis, so JOANNE.Davis, DAVIS, at C12forums.com.
Great. Thanks again, Joanne. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks to you too, David. Have a great day.